Hi guys, I've got another scrapbook layout for you today as part of the design team for Pink Paislee. And I'm going to say that I had no plan for this layout to start off with, but I got this mini envelope punch board for International Scrapbook Day was when I got it, and I've been obsessed ever since. I just cannot stop making these tiny little envelopes, and I figured there was no reason that I couldn't put those on a layout. So I'm just starting by making a bunch of envelopes basically, and I'm gonna go from there. Now this first one here I'm making is a 3x4 envelope, and I used one of the papers from the 6x8 Horizon pad. I'm going to use all of the Horizon collection today. I love this paper because it's got this beautiful coppery gold polka dot on it. That's one of my favorites. So I started with that one, and then I went back through the pad, and I'm going to make a bunch of smaller ones. So these little ones are going to be about 1 by 2 inches, I think they roughly turn out to be. The envelope punch board is so easy because it's got all of those measurements just right on the board, so you don't need to look anything up. It's all right there. You work out what finished size you want, and it tells you all the measurements to cut your paper and where to line everything up so that you can punch and score it. It's making envelopes so easy. You can see me there. I've trimmed out a bunch of pink ones, and I'm not going to end up using those all of them. I was trying to be like economical and use as much of the paper that I pulled out as I could, but in the end what I'm gonna go with is rainbow theme, of course, because is it a layout of mine if it doesn't have a rainbow on it? Probably not. So I'm gonna make a couple of these pink ones because one is a little bit darker and one's a little bit lighter. And then I'm going to go through the paper pad and try to pull out a bunch of different patterns that are going to give me a rainbow. Like I say, I'm not really sure what I'm doing with these envelopes just yet, but I'm just going to try and get one from every color of the rainbow, which does mean stretching myself a little bit further away from my usual pink and teal, and just trimming down some of these papers. Now the paper pad has lots of the more sort of multicolored patterns in it, so I definitely could not get all of the rainbow colors out of the 6x8 pad, so I do end up pulling some of my paper scraps as well, because lots of these more solid colors, solid patterns sort of like this are from the B sides of papers. So I did have a bunch of Horizon paper scraps that I've got sitting there that I can just trim out, so you can see me. That gives me my sort of red and orange and yellow, and I am just making sure that I've got one of every color. And then I can go ahead and just start making the little envelopes, which is so easy. You just line up the paper to the spot on the guide where it says, punch and score your way around the paper, then round off the corners, fold those flaps in, glue them down, and you've got a tiny little envelope. So I'm going to do that a bunch of times now, and I won't make you watch all of them, but the issue that I run into here is that I want my envelopes to have white inside. You can see the ones I've already made there, and what I realize all too late is that the papers that I have trimmed from the pattern papers are double-sided, so they are not going to have white interiors, and I'm going to need to find a solution for that. So I just finish up with the little envelope that I'm making because frankly my mind's a little bit blank at the moment as to what to do, and then it occurs to me I'm going to need to make a liner for these pattern papers that are double-sided. So I just grab some printer paper, just some regular white printer paper, and trim down the same size square, and I just added a little bit of adhesive to the inside and glued the two together, and then start punching and scoring and making my little envelope double-sided like this. But what happens is when I go to fold it all up, and I'm going to glue all the little flaps down, and then I go to fold it up, and the bottom flap has a sort of white outline from where the paper is. So I tear that off because it occurs to me I'm not going to need to line the entire envelope. It's really just the top flap that's going to be visible. So what I start doing is doing the same thing without actually gluing it down, and then just after I've done all that, I can glue just the top and the middle down and just tear the outside off. And what I eventually work out is that I don't need to tear it off. If I do that and then trim it in half, I end up with 2 liners for the price of 1. So eventually I get all of my little envelopes made, and then I can flick through the 12 by 12 paper pad and try and find a background to put them onto. I didn't want to add too much more color because I am eventually, after I shuffle all these little envelopes around, eventually going to put them into a rainbow order. You can see me, my brain coming up with the rainbow now. And so a background with color on it just wasn't really working. In the end, I went for this background paper, which is sort of a off-white creamy color with just some really pretty phrases on it. And then I can go ahead and arrange my envelopes here in rainbow order. And I think it works much better. But the issue that I found with this is that the whites of the envelopes don't stand out on the background enough, so you kind of lose the fact that there are envelopes on there. So I went and grabbed some distress ink and a distressing tool, and I can't remember the name of the ink. Sorry, hold on, let me check. It's pumice stone, so it's a sort of warmer neutral grey colour rather than black. I didn't want anything too particularly dark to make them stand out, just something softer, and I had thought about maybe using like a pink because I can't not, but it would have ruined the kind of rainbow effect, so I went for this sort of neutral grey colour, and I really like how that turned out. So now I've got all of those done, and I've grabbed my photos. They sit in there nicely, and I just want like a little bit more decoration. And I've been so inspired lately by all the gorgeous happy mail creations that I see on Instagram, and I wanted to do something along that vein, but in a layout, obviously. So I went and created a sort of custom sequin mix from some of the sequins in my stash to match the horizon line. And you can see me just playing to work out whether this is going to work, and I think it is. And I'm going to make some little shaker envelopes. And I'm sorry, I can't remember who I first saw make these. I know that I Am Absolutely Alice made some. And I'm sure she was inspired by somebody else, and I can't remember who that was, so I apologize in advance for not crediting properly, but this is the amazing idea that I have used on this layout. So I grabbed a piece of tulle and stitched around 3 sides of the envelope. Well, it's 4 sides along the point that shows, and then down to the center a little bit. Then I add the sequins in and stitch the bottom shut, trim off the tulle a little bit so it doesn't stick out the edge of the envelope, and then you've got a cute little shaker envelope. And I repeated that I think 5 times. I didn't want to do every single envelope because that would have taken forever and been too much sequins. Is there such a thing as too much sequins? Anyway, I did it 5 times, and now I'm pretty sure I've got the basics for my layout here now, so I'm going to start putting this whole thing together. I'm just stacking these 2 photos of Lily into my 3x4 envelope. I just glued one on top of the other and then sort of shuffled them in so they fit. And I kind of want it to stand out a little bit more, so I'm going to add some craft foam to the back of it just to give it a little bit of height. I don't want too much dimension. I am still trying to keep my layouts reasonably flat so that they all fit into my Project Life album, but just a little bit of dimension is nice. And I quite liked how that looked, so I decided to do the same thing to each of the shaker envelopes as well, just to help them stand out a little bit more. So I used an envelope to create a template, and I cut that out of foam 5 times, and then I can stick those onto the back of just the shaker ones, which will help them stand out. So I'm getting there guys. This layout's coming together really slowly. It's definitely a lot more of a labor of love for this one than my usual layouts. As I was going through that 6x8 paper before, there's a cut apart sheet at the top of it, and I figured one of those little cut apart pieces would be perfect to fit into the envelope and add my journaling to, which actually worked out really nicely. It fit totally perfectly. I want to add a little bit more texture to the layout, so I'm going a la Missy Whidden here, and I'm going to add a bunch of thread. My friend Michelle from the Stamp Spot sent me a whole pile of vintage threads, so I basically have a color of thread for every color of the rainbow. So I went and picked out a few, and I'm just filling in sort of blank spots. I'm not going to add the thread behind every single envelope, just sort of dispersing it amongst the layout. Now I did add a whole bunch of thread behind my photo just to fill in that sort of gap created by the overlapping of the photos, and I added 2 different colored threads because one of them was this beautiful iridescent kind of thread, so it doesn't have a lot of color but it's got a real shine in real life, so I had to add some of that in there somewhere to help bring out the sparkle of this layout. And now I'm finally going to commit and start sticking all of these envelopes down. So I am just offsetting them and sort of tilting them a little bit to make them look a little bit less linear. But as I'm sticking some of these down, there's a little bit sort of gappiness, especially this one here. So I do go and grab a little bit more thread, try to pick out a color that's going to match it. It's that sort of color that's in between a coral and a red and a pink and an orange. It's an interesting color but hard to match with thread, so I end up going with red because it just is a little bit darker and fills it in a little bit more. And now I'm finally getting to the fun part of the layout where I can start adding a little bit of embellishment. And for my title, I'm going to use this chipboard Happy that was on the chipboard sticker set and add the word dog underneath. I really love these alphas, but I wanted to keep the words all in one color to try to help them stand out on quite a busy page, and that Happy does a really nice job. So it just adds a little bit more yellow to the page. There isn't a lot of yellow on there, so I love that the title brings that in. Now I figured that envelopes are going to be perfect for putting stuff into, so I pull out all of my die cuts here. I've got some flowers and some leaves, and I'm just kind of sticking them in, trying to keep things tone on tone so they don't get too busy, although I think I fail at that miserably. It's a balancing act, I guess, between too sparse and too busy. So it does take me a little bit of time and a little bit of experimentation to just get it to the point where I feel like it looks balanced, I guess is what I'm trying to achieve. The balance between full and empty, I guess. And so eventually I work out what it's missing to my eye to create that balance is that visual triangle or a direction for your eye to be going through the layout. So I start shuffling some of the embellishments around to try and create a few larger clusters as such, not necessarily in one particular envelope, but just moving things around to create a little bit more of a diagonal flow from the bottom left to the top right. So I add a few more bits and pieces to the bottom left couple of envelopes, so sort of reddy orange ones, some more pink embellishments to the pink envelope next to Lily's photo, and I extend that out by adding a pink sticker onto the photo itself. And then my third sort of cluster ends up being on the top right of those darker blue envelopes. Adding the extra words from the stickers and the cut apart sheet helps with that. That just gives those 3 points of interest to create somewhere for your eye to flow across the layout. I just love how this layout turned out. It was a lot of work, more work than I would probably usually put into a layout, but I am just as obsessed with these shaker envelopes as I was at the beginning of the layout, so there's bound to be a million more. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you want to keep watching, don't forget to check out my Patreon page because there are a ton more videos over there. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!